Welcome to everyone. My name is Charlotte Kemp. I am on the EXCO of the Professional Speakers Association, and the PSASA of Southern Africa is hosting the session tonight. Although we do have a large number of members large number of attendees who are not members of the PSA, it's not a requirement at all. I'd like to just acknowledge the people that we have, and when I do say your name, won't you just wave and say hello? We have on the call Richard Mulvey. Richard, can you wave? Richard needs to wave.
Hello.
Thank you. Richard is the National President of the Professional Speakers Association. And just for those of you who don't know us yet, full disclosure, Richard and I are married. We are in the same house at the moment, although he's in a separate room. And then I just want to welcome the various chapter presidents from PSA. Chantal Jordan from Durban, from KZN. Can you wave and say hello? Chantal, can you wave? You're smiling, but you've got to wave, Chantal. Adele is here as well, Adele Durand from Gauteng chapter. Say hi, Adele. Maybe the sound is really slow, but Adele is there. And Chris Vermeulen is the chapter president of our new Pretoria chapter, and he's looking cozy as ever in his cap and his warm jacket. Say hi, Chris. Just wave. Or not. I'll just wave for everybody else. Francois Muscat has just joined us. Francois is the deputy national president of PSA. Who else do we have? Jason Sander from Cape Town was supposed to join us, but he's not here yet. And just to let you know, I am the secretary of the Global Speakers Federation. And just to let you know that this is a well-attended, well-rounded session that we have here. This is one of the early sessions that we're having that we have planned for the rest of the year of these online meetings. And the idea is just to firstly try out some new technology to be able to reach more people across Southern Africa, people who are not necessarily in an area where we have chapters or are in other countries in this area. And also for those people who travel around and can't make a regular meeting, if you want to catch up. And then obviously for those people who really want to follow with the conversation and listen to the speaker. Tonight's speaker is Douglas Kruger, and we'll introduce him in a moment. I'm going to, just for the sake of just getting everybody to have a chance to say something and to test their technology, we're going to whip around the room, and everyone can just unmute yourself one at a time when we get there. Just unmute yourself, say hello, tell us what you speak about and which part of the country you're in, but really, really quick, otherwise we'll be here all evening. Chantal, can I start with you up at the top there? If you can just unmute your screen, Chantal Jordan. Your mute button is down the left. There we go. So just introduce yourself, Chantal. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chantal Jordan. I'm the president of the KwaZulu-Natal, the Durban chapter, and I speak development and communication skills.
Great. Thanks, Chantal. Martin Brown, I see you there as well. Can you easily do this? Unmute yourself and have a chat to us.
Hi all, I'm Martin Brown. I'm here from Gauteng. How's it, Doug? I speak on inspirational business speaker and disruptive change in the workplace. Excellent.
And Martin, we're friends on Facebook, but I haven't met you in person yet, so the technology will have to do until then. But it's great to have you on the call. Junaid, can you introduce yourselves for us, Junaid?
Hi everybody, yes, I'm Junaid Bayat. I'm from Durban, KwaZulu-Natal.
Great.
I'm not yet part of the PSASA group as yet. I have been invited by Chantal a few times because we work, I do a lot of work for SA Home Loans. I'm a speaker in the academic field. I help people, organizations turn around academic performance in their institutions and in their organizations.
Fantastic, sounds good. Thank you, Junaid. Richard, would you like to have a word? Richard Mulvey.
Yeah, I'm coming. Hi, Richard Mulvey. I'm a I speak on sales leadership.
Thank you. And Richard's from Cape Town here with me. Sipiwe, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Sipiwe Moyo. I speak out personal development and some career development. I'm a member of the PSA.
Cool, thank you. And is it Marlette or Mariette? Marlette? Hechi? I'm not sure if I've said your name correctly.
Hi, it's Marlette.
Marlette, thank you.
Marlette, yeah. I speak as Molly in the mountains because my nickname is Molly and my surname actually means from the mountains.
Oh, cool.
I'm a Gauteng inspirational speaker on over changes and goals.
Great, thanks Marlette. Alta Odendaal, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alta Odendaal. I'm not a member of the PSASA. I recently started talking about financial wellness and financial planning in the industry.
Excellent. Good topic. Thanks, Alta. Hannah. How are you, Hannah? Welcome. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Fine, thank you. My name is Hannah. I'm from Maung in Botswana. I'm a leadership coach. I speak about personal growth and leadership. And my focus is in organizational development and employee engagement.
Fantastic. Thanks, Hannah. Welcome to the meeting. Adele from Gauteng. Adele, are you with us? I'm not sure if it's mine or yours that is slow. All right, I'm just going to go into the next one in case there's a problem there with Adele. I can't work out.
Hang on.
There we go.
Hang on, can you hear me now? Ah,
yes.
Okay, sorry guys, wrong speaker set. Sorry,
Right.
I'm Adele from Gauteng, Gauteng chapter president. I'm a little bit sick, hence the beautiful husky voice. Got my med lemon next with me. I speak on habits and using it for high performance.
Great. Thanks, Adele. And Mark Bind, welcome. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi guys, I'm Mark. I live in Cape Town. I speak on spiritual matters. I'm currently running a workshop based on applying the ancient Hawaiian Ho'oponopono process to the history of South Africa. Just trying to heal some of our old wounds. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. And Seth, welcome, Seth. Folks, for those of you who joined us, there we go. Carry on.
I'm Seth Randall. I'm not yet a member of the PSA, but very interested in becoming one. I'm starting out a career in speaking, having been in the training and coaching industry. I currently coach on transformation and entrepreneurial vision.
Thank you, Seth. That's great. Rod Jones, can you introduce yourself for us, please?
There we go. Hi all, Rod Jones. My passion is call centers, and I do work in executive keynotes into the boardroom and motivational talks to call center agents. Nearly 40 years in this business.
Wow.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Rod. Chris Vermeulen, can you rouse yourself from your comfort and chat to us, please?
Hi, I'm Chris Vermeulen, and I speak on emotional intelligence and leadership.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And the new chapter president of our Pretoria chapter. I think we just lost somebody, but let's go back to Lorraine Jenks. Hi, Lorraine.
Hello, everybody. I've got a flu, Adele. It's 10 days. Just hang in there. They call me the Queen. I'm a specialist in sustainability, climate change, and ethical food. And I'm actually an inspirational speaker, not an academic. I've given that up. Change mindsets. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Hi, Francois from Gauteng, but you are currently in KZN, I believe.
Hi, it's Francois here. I'm from Gauteng, currently in my caravan at Salt Rock, and I speak on social media, digital marketing for personal branding.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Leanne Mayer. Hi there.
Hi, good evening. I'm not a member yet, but I'm very interested. I'm a mentor and coach for executive personal assistants, and I speak on personal branding, leadership, and communication.
Marvelous. Leanne, what part of the country are you from, or the world?
I'm in Gauteng, Pretoria.
Okay, very nice. Good. Hi, Leon Martin.
Hi, I'm Leon from Cape Town. I speak on business growth and conversion optimization, how to optimize your business to grow your profits.
Great. And Leon just did a very, really interesting presentation at the Cape chapter last week. I'm sorry I missed that. All right, and we have a Marissa without a picture. Hi, Marissa.
Hi there, my name is Marisha. I'm a De Martini Method facilitator, and I help people to see that everything in life is balanced. And I am also an ADHD expert. I'm very passionate about helping parents realize that ADHD is not a life sentence. It's actually a blessing.
That's marvelous. Good topic. Thank you very much. All right, folks, we've gone through the introductions. We're going to move on now to our speaker, Douglas, who's sitting very quietly, and I haven't even asked him to introduce himself yet, but he'll have a chance to talk. What I'm going to suggest, because we are having a couple of unstable internet warnings here, I'm going to mute everybody and then just, actually everybody is muted, so that's fine. It's just Douglas. If you'd like to turn off your video, that'll be fine as well. I do have some nice screenshots that we can share. But if you all turn it off, then Douglas will be speaking to a whole lot of black screen. So we'll keep on a couple of pictures to keep Douglas company. Now, we've known Douglas for a very long time through the PSA, and I've known him through Toastmasters. Douglas is highly regarded in the work that he does. In fact, privately, and we don't want this to be a members joke, but we do kind of tease each other behind Douglas's back about his marketing. And there's a little saying when it comes to how any other speaker is marketing themselves, we say, now what would Douglas do? So he's a bit of an example to us. One of the things Douglas has managed to do very well is to start writing books, which is what he's going to speak to us about. We all know that writing books is important, but Douglas has taken it to a different level, and he has a really good contract with Penguin Books. And what Douglas explains is that the books kind of inform his speaking, and then the speaking informs the books. He ties them up nicely together, and having books in a sense like that the way he's done it, just means that he's been able to escalate his whole speaking career. So Douglas, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got about 20 minutes or so to speak, and then once we're done, we'll handle some questions from the rest of the room. Thanks, Doug.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Charlotte. How's the sound over there? Is that all right?
It's all good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good evening, folks, and thank you very much for joining us for this session. I've called my presentation tonight, Shelves, Why Speakers Should Write and Publish Books and How to Do It. And you're seeing me in front of my own green wall, and it's a simple little speaker's trick. I used to use a green screen for a while, but I found that the ruffles actually became a problem. If your spouse will allow you to paint an entire wall in your home, that solves that issue right there. So that's what you're seeing in the background. Yeah, so for my 20 minutes, I'll quickly outline some of my own publishing history, including some ups and downs and lessons I've learned along the way. And then we'll look at some practical insights into writing a publishable book first, and then getting it published successfully. And afterwards, in the last few minutes, we'll cover a couple of ideas about publicizing it after the fact and keeping the marketing going. So a very quick overview of my own publishing life. I'm up to 7 nonfiction books now. The first one was published in, I think, 2006 by a publisher that I worked with only once, and I actually had quite a bad experience with them. And I'll get into a bit of detail on that too. After that, I self-published a book, and following that one, my third book was then commercially published once again. And that becomes quite a big debate among speakers as to whether you want to self-publish or go the commercial route. And I would strongly recommend going the commercial route. My reasoning is this: there is honestly not a great deal of income to be made in publishing books in South Africa. We're a very small market. The real gem to this one, the value in it, it lies in the credibility and how it helps us to gain media publicity and to position ourselves in the landscape. So the money is nice, and I'll talk numbers as well. It can be a car payment here and there, it can be some petrol money, whatever the case might be, but you certainly can't, in this small market alone, run a full-time career just by publishing books. So financially, think of it as a nice to have, but it is more than that. It's also part of your positioning. Now, looking at this specifically from a speaker's perspective is quite an interesting thing. I received an email a couple of weeks ago from a young aspiring speaker who had an interesting topic for a book. And his whole goal was to break into the speaking industry and to use the book to position himself as a thought leader. And the idea that he ran by me, having been working in recruitment for a while, he was very au fait with the mistakes and missteps that people make when they are applying for new jobs. And he wanted to write a book about how to be interviewed successfully and how to get new jobs. And I responded to that and said, in isolation, a book like that is not a bad idea. You may sell many copies of them on the shelves, but from a speaker's perspective, it is entirely the wrong positioning. Because consider, when are you ever going to speak to a group of unemployed people? It's not a target market. And frankly, when is a CEO or a divisional director ever going to hire a person to speak on the topic of how to be interviewed successfully? Now, with a little bit of creative thought, you can switch that topic around and use it to position yourself incredibly well. And what I suggested was that he look at it from a CEO or a divisional director's perspective. And that would mean write a book about how to recruit talent from the millennial generation, or how to recruit the right kind of talent to keep you ahead in this new economy, or something that would apply to the kind of person who books us as speakers. So realistically, you do want to put a little bit of thought into the nature of the book that you published. The very first book that I had published was a simple little one on public speaking. I had entered and done reasonably well in a few Toastmasters contests, and the first one was titled 50 Ways to Become a Better Speaker. Now, it was a little bit of a disaster in the background, in the sense that the publisher did assign a marketing manager to my title, but I never met with the guy, never heard from him, didn't do any interviews, there was no marketing, no publicity. They literally left me in the dark. And because it was a first-time book, I wasn't aware of what the process should look like. Now, I'm very fortunate at the moment to be working with Penguin publishers, and I must say they're very good with this kind of thing. They're very into their media, their publicity, sending speakers and authors on interviews and road trips and things like that, and that makes a very, very big difference. So let's talk about money for just a second. How much do you actually make writing books? In the South African market, our average business books, when I say average, how long is a piece of string, sell for around 200 to 300 Rand. Most of my own books I see are priced in stores, and I have no say over this, priced in stores at around 230 Rand per book. Now, out of each book sold in stores, the author receives around 10 to 15%. So for a book that sells in stores, I'm getting anywhere between, say, 15 to perhaps 30 Rand. There's not much per individual book sold on the shelves. However, and this is perhaps the more useful part, is when we buy our own books from the publisher and then sell them at events, we can actually make substantially more. In my own case, I buy my books for around, I think it's about 110 Rand per title. And if you then sell them at the same price that you would sell in stores, which is say around 220 Rand, you're looking at well over 100 Rand's profit in each case. And of course, you can offer discounts for bulk, things down those lines. So in practical terms, it means that if you want to buy your own books, say you want to buy a batch of 100 books ahead of a conference, you're going to have to spend around 10,000 Rand to do that. But there is another 10 to 15,000 rands profit implied in that after the fact. It may take you a while to recoup that, but it's well worthwhile down the line. So there is money to be made if you're creative about it. And of course, what you do want to try to do is to sell the books in bulk. I've had some small scale successes with that one. I've heard of South African speakers who have sold 1,000 books at a time, but honestly, that's very unusual. The best that I've ever had was, I think if I remember correctly, it was for Gibbs, buying about 250, 300 books in one go. And that's pretty good. You then obviously offer a discount on it, and it's well worth their while. It gets you out there into circulation, and you can earn a fair amount of money on that. But really, money is not exceptional in this market, and it's more about the positioning. So how do you approach a publisher? How do you actually get your book published in the first place? Well, on every publisher's website, they will offer submission guidelines. And if you go onto any publisher's site, say like a Penguin, Random House, or whatever the case might be, there will always be a little tab that speaks directly to authors and provides submission guidelines. It's very silly not to use the guidelines, and they can be fairly pedantic. They get right down to things like how they want their line spacing, how many pages and what kind of word count to submit. And what you don't want to do is to disqualify yourself by not following a simple guideline. Most of them will initially ask for three things. They will ask for a bio of you as the author, and that's your chance to show your credibility and why you're the right person for this topic. And then they'll ask for a synopsis of the book. And it's important that we understand what they're looking for there. They really want to know that the book will sell. They are, after all, a commercial entity. So the synopsis should be persuasive in nature. It's not just a description of the book, it's a description of why the book will sell. And we'll also go into a little bit more detail about what exactly they're looking for there. And then generally speaking, the third thing they'll ask for is either the first chapter or perhaps the first 3 chapters. And these days you can send these things in by email. They used to ask for it by hard copy only, but fortunately they accept by email these days. And the process after that is generally, it's about a month, and hopefully you'll get a response. The response will tend to be very hesitant and very cautious on their part initially. So you'll get a letter back saying, we haven't disqualified you yet, send us another sample chapter or 2. At that stage, they're looking for credibility and for professionalism. So the submission guidelines are on the websites, do follow them. What are they looking for? They're looking for a number of things, and one particular thing works well in our favor as speakers. They are looking for people who are willing to sell their own books. Now, this may sound strange, but most authors are not willing to do media interviews. They're not willing to speak on the topic of their book, and they're not willing to use social media to sell their own titles. Now, opposite, if there's a camera, I'm going to jump in front of it and hold my book up and wave and smile. I'm that girl who points to the refrigerators, and they value that. They do actually look for that kind of thing in their authors because they want to sell books. That's the point. So you do want to emphasize the fact that you have existing networks. If you're a member of Toastmasters and can and do speak at Toastmasters meetings, divisional meetings and so on, mention that. If you're a member of PSASA, that's another channel, and it's well worth mentioning that too. Any kind of networks that you have, any businesses that you're involved in, anything that will allow you to market your own books, make a strong point of that. So tell them that you're willing to do the media, you're willing to help with the advertising, you're willing to speak on the topic. Do also mention any credibility that you have in terms of matter. Now, it is generally quite pressed for time, so you don't want to send through lengthy bios that go into great detail about your past and your history, but you do need 1 or 2 key points that will set their mind at rest that you are something of a subject matter expert, that you have some degree of qualification, or that you have in some way lived through the thing that you are writing about. So anything that helps with your credibility. Credibility can also include media interviews. So say, for example, you're in an unusual scenario where you're writing a book that you don't have a qualification about and you don't have any previous experience in that field. You can nevertheless short-circuit that by pointing out that you write articles for various publications and by pointing out that you are often portrayed in the media. And that's quite useful to them too. Now, in terms of nonfiction, which is what we're really dealing with here as speakers, one of the surest ways to get a yes from a publisher is simply to pay attention to this one thing. they will ask you a question that has two sides to it. And it's important to understand both sides and what they're looking for. They're going to ask you how your book relates to similar books that have already been published, and they're going to ask you how this book is different to the books that have already been published. It's quite important to understand what they're looking for. There are two opposing dynamics and two opposing ideas. On the one hand, they're essentially asking you, have you read everything else on this topic? Are you up to speed with all the latest thinking? Do you know what has already been said about this arena, this area of life? Then on the other hand, they're saying, how are you taking it one step further? And folks, I really believe that that's the key to this one. They want to know that you can advance the knowledge in this field, that your book is not just a repetition or a rehashing of everything that's come before. So if you can convince them that you're aware of all the existing literature, but your book takes things one step further in any way, it doesn't have to be a quantum leap, just a small step forward. That's the key to really getting their attention. And for my money, I think that's the most important thing that new authors need to know, and the single most important dynamic in terms of getting published. So what has been written before? How do you plan to move the body of knowledge one step forward? That's incredibly important. Now, in terms of the actual writing of the book, how do you go about it? How do you structure it? For many people, when we think about the idea of writing a book, it really is like climbing a mountain. And it's this vague mountain. We don't know where to begin. We don't know what our first steps might be. And actually, it turns out, in reality, it's a fairly simple process. It is very similar to constructing a keynote presentation as a speaker. Here's the simple boiled down formula. You have a number of points that you need to make, and you need to make each point come alive with stories and examples. And folks, that really is it. I mean, you can organize that into all sorts of complex patterns, and you can go into great depth with it, but really it's the same structure as speaking. It's make a point, tell a story. Make another point, tell another story. And if you study any of the really successful self-help or business or growth books, you will see that pattern from one end to the other. It's what Malcolm Gladwell does. It's what Rich Dad does. Any of the best-selling books, they really do simply follow that formula. Now, when we talk about telling stories, exactly the same as in the world of public speaking, they don't have to be grand stories. They can be very simple ones. And I have a little bit of a list of the kind of things that, that you can use. Stories can be simple incidents that you've witnessed personally. And I really mean simple. It can be, I was walking through a mall one day when, and that can help to illustrate and make it come alive. Then you can add things like complex case studies with far-reaching results. Now, of course, once again, you don't have to have done the case study, but you have to have done a bit of a literature search to be aware of the case study. So talking about that case study and telling it in story form creates another story that illustrates another point. But again, it doesn't have to be as complex as that. You can even tell anecdotes and stories from history. I mean, one very quick example, in my book on innovation, I talk about the story of the founding of Lamborghini. And Lamborghini has a fascinating founding story. Realistically, what it boils down to is the folks at Ferrari would not listen to a customer complaint by Dr. Lamborghini. And he became so angered by this that he vowed to start his own sports car company. And in fact, that's how they started the organization. So that's a wonderful story. And it's one that a number of people know, but it's the telling of the story that matters. And it gives you one more opportunity for a means by which to make your point come alive. Other things that you can do, here's a very useful one, particularly for us as speakers, coaches, and trainers, is to tell a hypothetical story. So a hypothetical story will take this basic format. You would put the audience, in other words, the reader, into the driver's seat. You would address them as though they are the primary character. And you might say something down the lines of, so this is the scenario that comes up. You face this situation and this is what happens to you. Here's how you used to react in the past and here are the results that you used to get. But now you try implementing this new idea into your life. You wake up one morning and attack this situation in the following way. This is what happens to you and these are the results that you get. So that's a wonderful way to incorporate storytelling without even having to have a real story. It's a hypothetical that puts the audience into the driver's seat. And those are particularly good for any kind of self-help or personal growth books. They work incredibly well. You can also quote other books. Now, here's the key to that one. You can, and the publishers are okay with this, you can spend a page or two, even 2 or 3 pages, describing a story or a point from someone else's book. But what you can't do is quote more than 2 or 3 lines at a time. So it's quite acceptable to say, as Malcolm Gladwell said in Outliers, a family wakes up one day and you explain the story. You can spend quite a bit of time and space in your book doing that. But what you can't do is direct quote more than 2 or 3 lines at a time. They get a little bit antsy about that one. So again, there, another example of how you can build stories into your books. Quote another book that helps to move the information forward. So those are just some examples, but really the simple idea is make a point, tell a story. Make another point, tell another story. And for my money, really the best books out there plunge you deeply into a complex story right from the word go. In fact, a book that I've been strongly recommending to speakers, teachers, trainers, anyone who has to persuade other human beings is called Made to Stick. Made to Stick. And the authors are Chip and Dan Heath. Now, any of my friends from the Professional Speakers Association know that I'm hooked on audiobooks. A couple of years ago, I downloaded an app called Audible, like the word audio, but audible. And you can then download audiobooks and listen to them in the car, in traffic, in gym, whatever the case might be. And I listened to this one as an audiobook, Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And it is riveting in terms of showing you ways to make simple stories fascinating. And I'll just give you one example from the book. They say, turn a story into a mini mystery. They give the example of a lecturer talking to a group of school kids, and his whole lecture was about the nature of the rings around a planet. And the question was, what were they made of? Now, if you think about that in simple terms, you could come out right up front and give away the answer. They are made out of X. But he didn't do that. What he did was he told the story about 2 groups of scientists on opposing sides of the globe. One group was convinced that the rings were made up of ice. The other group was equally convinced that the rings were made up of dust. And then he spent the next 30 minutes talking to these kids about this war that broke out between 2 groups of scientists, each trying to prove their point. The bell rings at the end of half an hour and nobody moves. They had to have the answer. And they stayed for another 5 minutes to get that answer. And just for the sake of interest, the answer is the rings were made of dust-covered ice. So it was both together. But what a simple little idea. Turn a story into a mini mystery. And by doing so, you heighten and you lead people on an emotional journey. And that is just one of the incredibly clever techniques I teach in that book. So go grab that one if you can. Made to Stick, Chip and Dan Heath. So the heart and soul of that is find ways to make each point as vivid and lifelike as possible. Like speaking, it's about theater of the mind. It's about getting people to live emotionally, to see pictures, and to go on a journey with you. And unless you're telling stories, there's no journey to go on. So each of your points comes alive with a story. Now, how big should a book be? Well, it is a difficult question to answer, but I can give you some basic parameters. For a business book or a self-help book, if we might call a book average sized, I would say that the minimum is about 50,000 words, and the upper scale to that is about 70 to 80,000 words. Now, you'll notice that I'm doing this in word count and not in pages. And it's little details like that that jump out at publishers. When you submit your manuscript, you talk in word count because that's the language that they use. So forget the idea of pages, think in terms of words. Stephen King talks about writing about 2,000 words per day. And honestly, that's not an incredible amount of productivity, but it's the sustained productivity that has led to the number of books that he has today. James Michener at one stage, the author of historical fiction, used to write around 7,000 words per day. Now, I don't know about you, but I could do that once, but I couldn't do that 2 or 3 days in a row. It's a very good idea to do a set word count per day. And if you can manage between 1,000 to 2,000 words, that's a fair amount and it will add up very quickly. So once you have about 50,000 words minimum and around 75 to 80,000 words maximum, you have a book on your hands. You can go lower than 50,000, but it's going to be a very small book, might be difficult to sell to publishers. Here's one of the strange reasons why that's true. They like a fairly thick spine because it stands out on bookshelves. They are, after all, a business. So 50 to 70,000 words is about average, it's about right. Now, before submitting your manuscript, I strongly recommend editing repeatedly. And I really believe that this is one of the great shortfalls of self-published works, is that people don't submit them to an independent publisher. The one and only non-commercially published book, self-published book that I did, I co-wrote with a friend and author named Tony Cross, and the two of us chipped in money to actually pay for a professional editor. And I cannot express strongly enough the difference that that makes. Even having written and published a couple of books now, I know what editors are looking for. I would not allow one of my books to go out without going it through independent eyes first. Honestly, for an author, it's like walking out without your pants on. It makes the world of difference. The best editors, I find, are non-intrusive and tend to just winnow things away. So for me, in a best case scenario, if I submit a manuscript that's 55,000 words long, what I'd like to get back from the editor is a 50,000 word manuscript in which they've changed almost nothing. So just tighten it, make it more concise, make it shorter, sharper, and punchier. But editors are worth their weight in gold. We get so close to a manuscript that we cannot see our own errors. And I also find for myself that I write non-sequentially. So I don't necessarily start at the beginning and write from one end to the other. I jump around. And what I then tend to do is I lose track of when I introduced a concept. So I may refer to it many times throughout the book. And the odd thing that happens is the first time it appears, you write about it as though you've already introduced it. 3 instances later, you introduce it for the first time. And it's those kinds of things that editors pick up on, and well worth their while. And if you do publish by yourself, do make a point of actually paying for a publisher. Now, once you've written your book, and once you've gone through the whole strenuous publishing process and you're waiting for your baby to come out, which is a frustrating thing as well, because it can take the better part of a year. The longest I've ever waited for a book to come out was literally a full year after completion. I've got one now that's coming out in about 2 weeks from now, at the beginning of next month, and another one that is written to completion, and I'll have to wait until January of next year before I actually see it. And what's odd about that is that there are certain things that talk about, say, innovation, Elon Musk, space travel, that might be outdated by then. So it's actually a little bit worrying. But let's say that you've waited for your book and it's out on the shelves, and there it is in all its glory. I have a couple of thoughts for you in terms of how to publicize it and how to really sell as much as you possibly can. The first one, and this is really true of anything to do with social media, is don't just advertise once or twice. Instead, tell a gradually unfolding story. So, for example, you might start off by saying, I've started writing a book on this topic. And then you'll say, this is my word count today for this book. And then, hooray, I finished writing my book. And this because you accepted. Then it's, here's the cover of my new book, which I actually did today. And after that, you shamelessly take photos of books on shelves, and you get other people out there to take photos of books on the shelves where they see them. And then you take photos of yourself doing a media interview. And there again, you tell an unfolding story. Tonight, I'll be on 702. Now I'm at 702. Here's a picture. It's me in bed after a wonderful interview at 702. Yeah, keep it going. So the idea is gradually unfolding story in order to really get as much mileage out of every instance as you possibly can. And of course, then be as willingly possible to do media interviews. Do them at the drop of the hat, do them on Sunday nights, whenever you're called upon to actually do them. Now, the second thing you can do in terms of publicizing your book and marketing it effectively is, as a speaker, mention it to your clients and do it right up front. So say, for instance, you've received that email asking about your availability for a certain conference, certain date, and you've responded with your fee. Part of your fee, mention straight away that you have books available on the topic. Now, we think of that initially as almost a little sort of shameless and tacky. But honestly, for conference conveners and for heads of divisions and CEOs, they want the extra value. If they're already spending that much money on you as a speaker to present on that topic, they want that topic to really hit home. So if they can send books home with their delegates, add them as gifts to their goodie bags, you are adding so much more value.
Charlotte's having a difficulty with her connection, which is very strange because we're in next door rooms. There you go. In any event, that was excellent. Thanks, Douglas. And there's some time for questions. Put up your hand if you have a question. Anybody? Any hands going up here?
Yep, Superior is live.
Just a quick one, Doug. I've written 2 books, self-published, and I think I've outgrown the self-publishing issue because of the same credibility that you are talking about. Is there a way, firstly, that I could convince a publisher to republish books that were self-published? Maybe let me stick to that question.
Okay, excellent question. Can you get a self-published book republished by a commercial publisher? The simple answer is yes. The first book that I had published with Penguin was Own Your Industry, How to Position Yourself as an Expert. And that one was originally written and published as a self-published book. What I did was I took the original book, submitted it to a professional editor and sort of up to the level of the thing. And then I sent that manuscript through to Penguin. And Penguin don't care to, or publishers in general don't mind too much so long as a self-published book hasn't sold in large numbers. So if it's been in bookstores, you've got a problem on your hands. If it hasn't, realistically, it's on nobody's radar. So what I would do is just re-edit it, get it looking really good, and send it off as a first-time submission.
Just a quick follow-up. So I know that when you did that with Own Your Industry, when you send it to Penguin, it almost like changed the topic slightly. Would you recommend that?
Yeah, well, it changed the size as well. It started off as a self-published book at about 40,000 words, and I then increased it to about 55,000 words. That said, the reason for the increase in content was because I'd been speaking on it for a couple of years. And as you know, your keynotes tend to evolve over time as you have more and more thoughts about that. So Penguin didn't have input into the content per se, I just had more time to evolve it. Although I will contradict myself there and say one thing that Penguin noticed that I hadn't is they came back with a very valid concern. They said, most of your experts are male. They said, we'd like some examples of women. And as a male writer, it hadn't even dawned on me that I had populated an entire book with male examples. So it's little things like that that publishers and editors know that we may not even think of.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Superior. Those good questions. Anyone else? You can literally physically raise your hand or you can send us a message in the chat box. Yes, Rod. Thank you, Rod. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi all, and hi Douglas. Really great insights there. Thank you very much indeed. The question of e-books versus hard copy books, I find that a fascinating model in today's environment. And I'm looking to make my book, which is about 90% finished, available only as a downloadable e-book in order to get the database. So your views would be highly valued. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Rob. Penguin actually do the uploading of ebooks on my behalf, so I don't have to do that, which is an absolute joy and a pleasure. I found I don't drive a lot of traffic to the ebooks, but my experience has been that in South Africa, at least, they don't seem to sell terribly well. People prefer the hard copy. They like to be able to sign a book and so on. But it really comes down to your goal. And as you say there, Rod, if your goal is to actually drive a database, it certainly is the way to go. It also helps you to traverse boundaries. If you get the opportunity to speak internationally, what's wonderful about that is physical books are unbelievably heavy to carry with you. And it really becomes an extreme problem in terms of weight. You can carry such small numbers. If they're available for download globally, it extends your reach absolutely massively. And I think the point there is really to do exactly what you're mentioning, which is to drive traffic, get the databases and so on. And I think if you're doing it that way, it's probably a very good idea.
Thank you. Thanks, Douglas and Rod. All right, we'll take one last question from Adele and then we'll wrap up. Okay, Adele and then Seth. Thanks, Adele.
Right. Hi, Doug. You and I had a conversation a couple of months ago about Audible, and I thought maybe you could just share your views on Penguin and the fact that you had one of your 2 books on Audible just for the rest of them, because I thought that was quite fascinating.
Great stuff. Thanks,
Where you
Al.
said
Actually,
they didn't really care.
I love audiobooks. I'm absolutely addicted to them. So I made a point of getting hold of Audible, the actual organization, and saying, can I submit my books? I have recorded one of my books onto my computer already using a high-end microphone and reasonably good sound dampening in my own home. And I submitted it to them and they said the quality is good enough. So you can actually do it that way and save studio costs. Now, the odd thing with Audible is that they view you, the author, as a publishing entity. So they see you as a publisher, not as an individual author. And the distinction, the difference that makes is this: until you have at least 6 books to offer to them, they won't accept the first one. So you have to create and record a huge amount of content before they'll actually take it. Now, if you could probably short circuit that system by, say, aligning yourself with a group of other authors who each have a book and calling yourself a publishing company. I don't think they'd have an issue with that one. But I've been very slowly but surely recording my own books. And once I'm up to 6 full recordings, I will actually send it to them. Now, there's like all digital things, there's no real initial cost and it's all profit after the fact. But the amount of work is quite surprising. I think it takes longer to record an audiobook than it does to write the book in the first place.
Okay. Thanks, Adele. Good question. Seth, you have your last question.
Thanks a lot, Doug. That was great. I just wanted to ask, how would you go about balancing the need for something to be relevant with the fact that it needs to be timeless if it's going to be published a year or a year and a half after you start writing it? How do you sort of manage that balance?
Yeah. Seth, it's an excellent question, and there's no simple answer to it. It's quite tricky. In fact, the book that's about to come out in 2 weeks' time is a very South African book, and I've written it to be a South African book. But in a similar vein to what you're asking, the one that comes out after that, I've tried to make it non-specific to a country, with the goal that hopefully I'll be able to republish through other branches of Penguin around the world. And it just comes down to being conscious of that fact while you're writing the book. So the stories and examples that I've used, I've tried not to talk in rands. I've tried not to use things that limit the book to a location. So I think the same principle would apply to what you're asking is, if you're trying to get around time periods, you're then going to have to talk about ways of thinking rather than specific activities. Now, the great thing about that is you can reference stories from the past, but you do want to keep them as relevant and as up-to-date as humanly possible. And honestly, it's a tricky one because the book will tend to come out about a year later. So you want to quote things that are as up-to-date as humanly possible, but at the same time, have it in the back of your mind as you're writing that you don't want things that limit it. Let's take a practical example. Say you're talking about Elon Musk and his rockets landing back on Earth. You don't want to end with a conclusion like it will never happen, because that could be invalidated. So perhaps the way to attack that then is to say, don't write anything that could be invalidated. Stick to principles that are actively going forward. If that makes sense.
Good. Thank you very much. All right, Douglas, we want to thank you. That was fascinating. Some really good, insightful comments that you made there. And I think from your vast experience, you had a lot to share with us that most of us who do self-publishing hadn't thought about. So thank you very much. We'd also like to welcome Andre, who joined us a little bit late on the call. How's it, Andre? Hopefully we have recorded the session well enough and you can catch up on the parts that you missed. Folks, we have just literally a few minutes left before we wrap up. And I wanted to know if there was anything that anyone wanted to share with us. Maybe an idea. Yes, Junaid, what would you like to share with us? Just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. Excellent talk, Douglas. Very well done. I liked your framework there. Guys, just to share with you, I'm a new speaker. I'm the new kid on the block. And what I did, I only got into speaking around about 2009, 2010. But in this time, I was able to get on national television. I have my own radio shows with a few radio stations. I'm even a lecturer at UKZN. Now, how I did this was, at one of my very first workshops in 2010, I actually sent the entire, I recorded it. I paid about $3,000 at that time. It was for 4 hours. I recorded the entire thing and I sent it to, I think it was freelance at that time. And I got it transcribed as a book. And the moment I started using that as well, you know, that positioned me, like Douglas was saying, the moment people see you as an author, that positioned me like you can't believe. And, you know, right now I've, in the 5 or 6 years, okay, 5 years that I've been coaching, I've done over 90,000 people. And I think I attribute it to the 2 books that I transcribed right in the beginning. So I just wanted to share that. And another thing that I wanted to add was what you can do with books, if you want to get large numbers, what I did was, because I work with a lot of youth, I got a big company to sponsor a couple of 100 books, you know, and that helped a lot.
That's very good.
You know, part of the CSR and things like that.
Yeah. Junaid, we will have to have a session in the future about how to do sponsorship, because that's a very pertinent field, but one that I think most of us are missing out on. Thanks, Junaid. Martin, do you have a question or a comment to share with us?
Yeah, I just want to ask Douglas a quick question. Douglas, if you have to go about writing a book that is more personally orientated, autobiography type style, or taking a story and elaborating on that, would you change the style of writing? Which style would you actually use?
Yeah, if I was going the personal route, there are 2 things that I would want to do in excess. I would want to draw tears, and I would want to draw laughter. And I think, as with good speaking, the greater the rhythm between those 2, the more you take people on a total emotional journey. So, you know, the best speeches, the best story examples, and some of the best books have that kind of bittersweet humor to tears, humor to tears, humor to tears. And we don't want to get stuck too far in one or the other. It really is the contrast between the 2. And that's when you let people in and you use a very conversational style of writing.
Good answer. Thank you very much. All right. Any last comments, questions? Nothing. All right. Folks, I want to thank you very much for sharing this time with us. Right. Okay. I'll give you the very last one, right? And then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think just really compliments to you and the team for putting this together. I think it's a great format, and I look forward to the prospect of there being many, many more, and many, many more learnings such as this. And Douglas, thanks a million. That was really valuable. Thank you, sir.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rod. Thank you very much. All right. So on that note, the next one is on the 3rd of August. It is our voting day. We're just double checking that it's going to work for our speaker, who is Graham Codrington, international, one of our busiest speakers. And he's going to be speaking about how to get international speaking gigs. Now, international is strictly outside of South Africa, and we have got plenty of countries like Botswana and Namibia and Zimbabwe around us, and other places where we can go. And I think, I honestly believe, and I had this discussion with my mastermind on Friday, even if you do not intend to speak overseas, having a conversation about positioning yourselves as a global or an international speaker, having that conversation, having that thought pattern in your mind, allows you to position yourselves better within South Africa. So even if you think, oh, this is way beyond me, this isn't what I want to do, I urge you to attend that session. Graham will have a huge amount of value to share with us. The session after that, Monday the 15th of August, that will be with Richard Mulvey, and Richard will be sharing with us how to monetize our intellectual property. And since we've already been talking about books, and there's a whole lot of other products we have as speakers, working out how to monetize it so that not everything that we earn has to rely on us being on stage in front of people. I think that is a very important thing to work on. That particular conversation is going to hint towards and lead us towards a midterm conference that PSASA is going to be holding in October. It's going to be held in Gauteng. It's going to be a whole weekend of monetizing your IP. So I urge you to attend that first session, and hopefully we'll point you towards something that will be even more comprehensive later on in the year. Folks, thank you very much for having this time with us. If you did enjoy the session, please go into the PSA Facebook page and make a comment and share and encourage other speakers to attend. This isn't a drive for membership of PSA. You really do not need to be a PSA member, but we want to be able to share our resources and our great speakers with every other speaker in Southern Africa. So it was wonderful to share with all of you. I'm going to wrap it up now. Say thank you very much. You can all wave goodbye, and we'll catch you online next time. Thanks a lot. Bye, folks.
Thank you.